Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Marisa Kazem, and today's video is going to be a little bit different to my other videos. So in today's video, I mainly wanted to talk about 8 fictional stories that have helped me grieve. I know that seems kind of random, but here's why I wanted to do it. So for those of you who are new to my channel, my dad passed away in February of 2021 from COVID. And during that time, it was actually a month after I had started my YouTube channel. And my dad watched my first YouTube video and he loved it and he was really proud of it. I wouldn't recommend watching it. It's not that great, but he loved it. And after he died, I still felt like I wanted to keep posting on YouTube, even though I was depressed and going through a lot. And you guys were there for me during that time. I remember uploading my February video last year, I think 2 weeks after my dad had died, and I talked about it in that video, and you guys were just there for me, and you've been there for me for this whole 1.5 years since he died. And I just really wanted to give back to you guys in a way. I did do a reading journal video a few months ago, and I mentioned one of the books in there that helped me grieve, and I've had a few comments about it, so I thought, why not just make a book video where I talk about different fictional books that have helped me grieve. Hopefully this gives back to some of you guys. Whenever I do talk about my dad in my videos, you guys always comment below and you talk about your own deaths that you're going through, and I just thought this could be like a nice little safe, cozy video where we talk about books that could help different areas of grief. So that is what I'm going to do. So for the setup of this video, basically I'm going to show you the book, give you a brief summary of what it's about without spoilers, and then I'm gonna specifically talk about how it helped me grieve and hopefully that it can help you as well. Also, if you're wondering, I only started reading for fun last year after my dad died, so this is not about all fictional books that are out there. This is just books that I have read in the last 1.5 years. So if you guys have any recommendations for good fictional stories that include grief in some way, definitely comment them down below because I'd love to find more and hopefully we can all help each other read more of this kind of stuff. So the first book that I want to talk about is House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin E. Craig, and this book is basically a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. It's a classic fairy tale. I haven't read the fairy tale, but I watched the Barbie princess movie when I was a kid, so I had a basic idea of what the story was about, and this is a dark retelling. So basically, our main character is Annalay, and when this book starts, we are basically at the funeral of one of the sisters, and I think 4 of the sisters are dead when the story begins, and our main character Annalay believes that the most recent sister's death was a murder. She doesn't think it was an accident, and then she starts to think that maybe all of her other sisters were murdered. So that's what this book is mainly about. We're following her perspective and her storyline, and she's trying to solve the murder of her sisters. And so the reason that they are called the 12 Dancing Princesses is because they basically find this world that they can escape to, where they can go and dance in the night, and that is something that I felt like I related to when my dad died. I am not a dancer, I don't go and dance, but you know, when my dad died, all I wanted to do was escape and go do something that I love instead, but I wasn't able to. But this book helped me feel as if I could do that because I was living those experiences through these princesses, and it was just really wonderful to read through. Another theme that is really present in this book is the idea of being haunted by your loved ones, and I know that doesn't sound very comforting, but that is how I felt. When my dad died, I was in the room when he died. I watched him and held on to him as he died. That image haunts me. I'm very glad to have been there for my father's death and to say goodbye to him properly, but seeing your loved one dead is definitely a really haunting feeling, and this book goes through that. Not just from the main character, but even the youngest sister. I think she's meant to be like 5 years old. Even she is haunted by the deaths of her sisters. It's just this comforting feeling reading this book, because if you've been through that and you've experienced death in that way, then these characters can understand you, and I felt like that was something I couldn't get at the time. I couldn't really talk to my family much about it, also because when my dad died, it was only me, my mom, and my boyfriend who were in the room, and I didn't want to start describing my dad's appearance to other people, especially not the rest of his family. Like, they don't want to know that. But it was hard for me, and This book just helped me get through that haunting feeling. I remember right after my dad died, my boyfriend said I was literally like a ghost. It was 3 days after, and I was just so disturbed and I was just crying. That was me being haunted by those images in my head. And so this book really helped me with that. If you are grieving in a way like that, you are haunted by your loved one's image, then I think this book could help you. This is a dark retelling, so there is some spooky stuff in here and also one gory scene kind of later on in the book, which I was not expecting. So if you're not comfortable with gore, then maybe this isn't the book for you, but it was only one scene and it was quite short, so it was okay for me to read. Another theme in this book that I really related to was the idea that everyone's moving on and you are still stuck in one place. And that is because there is one point when the rest of her sisters that are still alive are sick and tired of grieving. This was in that time period where when you're grieving, everyone wears black and you just mourn and they don't celebrate or have fun or do anything for several months or a year while they're grieving. But for many, many years, they've been grieving because sisters keep dying. And so the sisters are at a point where they are fed up with grieving and they just want to go and have fun and have a ball. But Annalay, our main character, says, no, how can we do that? Our, most recent sister just died and she feels alone in this. She feels that everyone else in her family is just ready to move on and move forward and she's not quite there yet. And that is something I also related to. Not that my family were ready to just move on from my dad's death, but it just felt like everyone was moving on faster than me and that I was still stuck in my grief. I am still stuck in my grief to this day. And it just feels like this book really understood what it feels like when your family disagree with you. Also because when your family is broken from grief and death, you do disagree on a lot of things. I feel like that's something we don't always expect. When you think of families that are grieving, you just think that they're all going to be sad and cry together, but that's not it. There's so much more involved and disagreements is a huge thing, and this book also represented that. So if any of those themes sound like something you're going through with grief, I would recommend this book. It really helped me, especially with the feeling of being haunted. So the next book I want to talk about is called The Perfect Ruin by Shonora Williams. This book is a way of expressing anger through grief, and let me just tell you why. So we are following the story from Ivy's perspective. Ivy, as a teenager, lost both of her parents in an accident. Basically, at the time, the person responsible was able to hide their identity so that they couldn't be caught. And this book is set many years later. She's now like 18 or 19, I think, and she's in therapy, and her therapist has learnt the name of the person responsible for her parents' death, and she tells Ivy the person's name. Her name is Lola Maxwell. This book is basically about Ivy plotting and getting revenge on Lola, and it is so intense. This is a thriller, but it's not scary. There's nothing like scary or gory in this. It's just more like suspense and thrilling because you're wondering what Ivy is going to do next. But this book will help you release some anger, at least it did for me. I really relate to Ivy in a way because there is a specific person that I blame for my dad's death. I know that sounds weird because I said he died of COVID, but there is a specific person involved that I blame, and I was so angry at that person at the time, but there's nothing I can do about it. There's no way I can get justice or get revenge on that person, but Ivy can. And when reading this book, it just helped me get that relief out, get that anger out, and the idea of revenge, if I could do it, what would I do? Because I thought about that all the time when my dad died. I was constantly thinking about how can this person pay for what they've done? But in reality, you can't go do that in real life. That's not the right thing to do. And that's not the right thing to do for Ivy either. She does it, but it doesn't work out. And there's just this whole mess. There's so much involved in this story, but it helped me release that feeling of I'm angry, I want revenge, but then you see all the consequences that Ivy faces, how nothing is going to bring that person back, and that's a theme really present in this book, and I just loved it. This book also has a really great twist to it. If you like mysteries or thrillers that have twists, I'd really recommend this book as well. If you are grieving and you're angry, because Ivy is always angry, you want to read about a young girl who's just constantly angry about grief, this is the book for that. So the next two books I want to talk about, it's actually a series, and it's called A Song of Wraiths and Ruins and A Psalm of Storms and Silence. This series is phenomenal. It is amazing. If you haven't read this series, you have to. Like, I'm just telling you, you have to because it is so good. Even if you're not grieving, this is an amazing series. And basically, we have Princess Karina and Malik, they are set to kill each other from the very beginning of the book, which may sound a little corny and a little cheesy, but it actually makes a lot of sense. So the story starts with Malik trying to get into the city with his sisters, and something goes wrong, and basically he has to kill Princess Karina to fix everything. Then from Karina's point of view, something happens in her life and she needs to do something and kill someone in order to fix everything. However, because Malik is trying to kill her, he ends up crossing paths with her, and now he is a possibility of a person that she may have to kill, so that's why they're kind of set up to have to kill each other. So the main thing I really loved in this series is that grief is present for everyone in this story. And this is something that I didn't really understand. Before my dad died, 6 months prior to that, my granddad died. But before both of them died, I have had a very blessed life without having to face grief. I'd had family members that had died when I was a very young child, but I don't remember it, and so I didn't really grieve. And so when I was suddenly struck by grief, I didn't understand how to go through it, how to face it, and I felt as if no one could understand me because no one else was grieving like me. I know that's not true, but at the time I just really felt like I was the only person in the world grieving, and this series helped me realize that everyone is grieving. You are reading this book from Karina and Malik's point of views, but there are many other characters involved, and you just learn more and more that so many people are grieving constantly. When I picked this up, I had no idea that that's what I was getting myself into, but I did not realize that I was going to get the most helpful story of my life in these books. In this series, there is a theme of the dead are the dead are the dead. That is something that I struggled with when my dad died. When he died, I just kept thinking of what I would do to bring him back. Everything I would sacrifice, everything I would give up just to bring him back. And Karina and Malik both go through that in this book. They both want to risk everything to get that person back, but they are faced with the reality that it can't be done in a way. And through this book, I got to pretend that I was in the shoes of these main characters and that I was doing everything to get my dad back. When you read it in a book, you get to see someone doing what you wish you could do, and even though they do it, it still doesn't work. And that's what really helped me, because when my dad died, I was obsessing over the past and what I could do to fix things, what I could do to change things, and this book will teach you that it's not the way things are done. You can't do that, and you have to accept and move forwards, and that's what this series is mainly about. It's a wonderful, beautiful fantasy about princesses and kingdoms and magic, but those are such present themes in this book, and I really recommend it. So for this next book, I feel like you guys are not going to take me seriously when I show you the cover, but let me explain first. The next book is Part of Your World, A Twisted Tale. This is a retelling of The Little Mermaid as if Ursula won instead. This story is set 5 years after the first movie, and Ursula succeeded. She married Prince Eric as Vanessa, took Triton with her, and Ariel had to go back to Atlantica, and she rules as queen. The reason she rules as queen is because her sisters blame her for their father's death, and they don't want to be queen, so they pass it on to Ariel. First of all, I will also just say the writing in this book is phenomenal. When I was reading this, it really felt like I was just watching a different version of the movie. The way the characters are portrayed, the way the dialogue is, I could literally hear the voices of all of the actors in this. Now, I know you're probably wondering, how did this help me grieve? This helped me grieve because it's grief set 5 years after she thinks that her dad is dead. And so basically the story is that Ariel finds out through Scuttle that Ursula may be keeping King Triton alive as a little polyp, and she's able to figure out a way to undo what she's done wrong. But in this book, Ariel is mainly grieving the life that she used to have before her dad died. Obviously, I'm sure as soon as her dad died, or she thought her dad died, that she was focused on losing her dad. But now it's 5 years later, and she's just getting on with life, but she's so fixated and focused on how life used to be for her, what it was like to just be a happy, carefree teenager instead of being Queen of Atlantica. And that is why this story resonates with me so much, because when my dad died, I felt like so much responsibility was put on my shoulders. I had to be in charge of the funeral, I had to call the mortuary, library. I had to help sell my dad's business. I had to help sell his home. There was just so much responsibility dumped onto me. And instead of me feeling like a young adult who's just going to college, it was like everything had just changed and dynamics in the family were different, and this book definitely touches on that. Even though it's a Disney retelling, this book was just so good at capturing what it's like to miss how life was before. I am always thinking about how much I miss life when my dad was alive, and even how I used to be. I used to be different when my dad was alive. I was more positive, I was more cheerful, and I was more naive about the world, and I really miss that, and Ariel misses that too. And by the end of this book, she's still a changed person because of all the trauma she went through. And obviously, my dad is not kept alive by Ursula somewhere, so I cannot go and do anything to bring my dad back. But it's fun watching Ariel get the opportunity for that. That's again something I fantasize about and wish I could do, and I'm able to live that life through this book because Ariel does it. Another thing I also really loved about this book is that Ariel constantly feels guilty for what she did. Obviously, you know, she traded her voice to Ursula, and she feels responsible for her dad's death. I do not feel responsible for my dad's death. I did not create COVID, but there are things I did at the time when my dad was in the hospital where I thought I was doing my best, but then after he died, and when I look back, I don't think I did my best. I think I could have done more. I think I could have done better, and that's something that Ariel faces too. She wishes that she was smarter back then. She wishes she had done things differently, and that's something that I wish too. I wish I could go back and change things, and I can't. But this book just touched on that idea too, and the feeling of being guilty. When you feel guilty about the death of someone you love, it's like no other guilt that you can imagine. And through this book, I was able to feel less guilty because you learn from Ariel and the other characters that you did your best at the time, you did what you thought was right, and you just have to move past your mistakes and move forwards. So if you haven't read this, I would really recommend it. So the next book that I wanted to talk about is Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen. This is another mermaid book, but it's very different to Part of Your World. It's an amazing mermaid fantasy about this mermaid named Simi. She is not your regular mermaid. She basically has this purpose of finding dead bodies in the sea and blessing their souls as their souls go into heaven, basically. But she sees a boy in the sea that is still alive, and she saves his life. And that's where the book basically begins, and she's not supposed to save lives. She doesn't realize that she's not really meant to do that in the beginning, and she and the boy go on this journey to fix what she's done, but then there's a lot of challenges and other things involved in this story that's much more detailed and complex than she ever expected. Another theme that is really present in this book is slavery because of the time period it is set in. Slavery is not very big at the front of this story, but it is in there, and that itself is a different type of grief. Now, obviously, I am not a victim of slavery. No one in my family is. I have never been through anything like that, and I can never relate or understand exactly how that would feel. But this book talks about loss a lot of the time. Many of the characters in this book are facing loss that was too sudden or too soon, and that is something I related to in this book. Again, I'm not saying I can relate to slavery. Obviously, I can't, but these themes are present, and that feeling of loss is in here. Another theme that's present in this book, which is actually similar to Part of Your World, is that Simi is missing the life she used to have. She has not been a mermaid her entire life, and she's constantly grieving and longing for the way things used to be, and that is again something that I'm always doing. I'm always picturing the way my family was when we were all alive and we were together, and Simi does that a lot, and I just really related to her in that way. Obviously, I'm not a mermaid swimming around saving lives, but I just really related to Simi because that is what she's doing. She is grieving constantly, and so are many of the other characters, and this is another one of those books that makes you realize that everyone is grieving something, and it's a painful journey to go through. So another theme that is present in this book is the fact that Simi has to sacrifice a lot for people that she loves, and that is something that I relate to. When my dad was in the hospital, basically he needed a lung transplant in order to survive, and he was too unstable to be able to do a lung transplant, and also there aren't like a million lungs available. But I offered to the doctors, I said, can I please give my dad one of my lungs and we do the surgery? And they denied me because it was too unsafe and unstable for my dad, and then it would just put me in harm's way. But I offered anyway because that's what I wanted to do for my dad. And in this book, obviously there's no lungs, there's no COVID, it's not about that, but Simi had to sacrifice something, and she wanted to sacrifice in order to do something for the people that she loves, and that is something that I wish I could do. I do fantasize about it all the time. I think, wow, what if I could have just given my dad my lung and he'd be here? But I couldn't do that in real life. I get to fantasize about that through a book. This book just helped me express that side of me where I just wanted to give up everything for my dad and I couldn't, but it was nice to read about a character who could. So the next book I want to talk about is actually a kid's book, and it is called The Magical Mermaid and the Moon by Angia Harris. So this book I read in one sitting. It took me like 4 hours. It's like 167 pages, and it's basically a cute story about a mermaid who watches her father get murdered, and then her life is put in danger, and she basically has to stay strong throughout all of it. This book is a very quick read, and she doesn't even have a name. She's literally just the mermaid princess. It doesn't have pictures or anything, but it's like a quick short story, and I really love this book simply because it helped me feel positive at the time. Like I said, a lot of the books that I was reading are pretty dark, but this one's not dark at all. This one is just very positive, and even though she's upset, she's grieving, she's in danger, she's terrified, she remains so strong. It was just such a cute story. I don't have too much to say on this book, but I would say if you want something positive, if you feel like you're a princess who's lost the king of your world, like I have with my dad, then I would recommend this book because it's just really cute and heartwarming, especially when you feel like you need strength, because the mermaid princess is able to stay so strong even though I felt like I was falling apart, and this book really helped me with that. And so the final book I want to talk about in this video is This Woven Kingdom by Tahera Mafi. I really recommend this book to anyone. This is a beautiful Persian mythology, and I'm Persian, so it was really nice to see us represented in fictional books for a change. And this story is basically about two main characters. There is Elise, who lost both of her parents when she was a child, or actually I don't know how young she was, but she was decently young. She lost her parents, and she used to come from like a wealthy family, like they were happy and everything was perfect. She literally describes her previous life as being perfect, and now she is a servant who's getting beaten all the time, and her life is just not what she wants it to be. And then we have Cameron, who is the prince, and he is also grieving because his grandfather is the king at the moment, but his father died, and so his father never became king, and now Cameron is the next in line to be king, and he's grieving and facing a lot as well. And this is an introductory book to a series. There are 2 more books that have to come out yet for this. It's meant to be a trilogy, so this was a very introductory type of story. But you are basically really getting involved into the characters and the details of the plot. Basically, they will both meet at some point, like something happens, their paths crossed, and Cameron becomes interested in Elise. There's more to it. It's not just because she's pretty. There's more to it. So there are many reasons I relate to this book, but one of them is that Elise has no parental guidance. She is stuck. She is lost. She feels like she is letting her family down all the time, and yet they're not even there to witness it. And that's kind of how I feel. I feel like I'm letting my dad down, which I know it sounds kind of depressing, but if he were here, I'd be able to ask him questions about what I'm doing in life, and he was always a resource of guidance for me, and I don't have that anymore. And that's how Elise is. She doesn't have that, and she's struggling. I also relate to Cameron a lot because, like I said, he is now next in line. He suddenly went from being, I think, like a 19-year-old prince to now suddenly being the next in line. He's stressed. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know he's making the right decisions, and that's how I feel because, again, when my dad died, there was so much responsibility put on me, and when your parent dies, you suddenly feel taken out of the idea of being a child. You are no longer a child. You are a full adult trying to figure things out, and that's how things are for Cameron and Elise in this book. Now, the biggest component of this book to do with grief that really helped me, which is different from all of the other books, is the fact that there is interaction with dead bodies in this book. It's not a lot. It's both of our characters have an interaction with their loved ones, and it is something that I didn't think I would find. Like, there's no way you're gonna know you're gonna read that in this book, but it came up, it happened, it's quick, and it's something I really relate to. Like I said, when my dad died, I saw his dead body and it haunted me. And not only did I see his dead body, but when my dad died in the hospital, I was cuddling and kissing him while he was dead, and that is just something that haunts me. I don't regret doing it because I love my dad and I wanted to say bye to him in that way. Also because when he was on the ventilator, I couldn't hug him because I could interfere with the machine. All I could do was like hold his hand. And so getting to hug and kiss him once he was dead was something I needed. But it is haunting on you, especially because you don't ever think that's going to happen and that you're going to do it. But in this book, there are two different types of interactions with a dead body. One that was more similar to what I went through, and one that was just horrific and definitely a haunting type of thing that one of the characters has to remember and live with. And I just found both of them comforting for me to read just because I had been through something similar. If you have been through something like that and you don't want to read about it, then don't read this book. But if you want to read something like that, then I would recommend reading this just because it comforted me and it made me feel better. Also because, you know, when someone dies, you often see in movies that, you know, oh, don't look at the person's body, you know, stay away, it's better for you. Or even then you'll see people saying, oh, I can't look, it's too much. For me, when my dad died, I said, I have to see him. I don't care how he looks, I have to see him. And I had to touch him, I had to kiss him, I had to hug him. And it kind of feels weird once you've done that to your loved one's dead body, but this book made me feel more normal about it. I know there are many people out there who do hug and kiss their loved ones even though they are dead when they're saying goodbye, but again, I've never experienced that before, and this book just made me feel more normal about it, which is why I loved it. So if you feel like you did something similar and you feel strange about it, I'd say that this book can make you feel more normal because one of our main characters does that, and it's not treated as weird, it's just treated as showing your love and wanting to say goodbye, and I'd really recommend it. This book was phenomenal. It was a great start to a trilogy that is coming. I can't wait for the next book. Also, the next book is Pink. Hello, I love Pink, so I'm excited for that. But this book really helped me grieve, and this was the most recent book that I read that helped me grieve. And I started tabbing as well because I wanted to try doing that. And yeah, I'm rambling. I really recommend this book. And so those are the 8 books that I have read that really helped me grieve. If you are still here at this point in the video, leave down below a white dove emoji or a white heart. Both of those make me think of my dad, so leave one of those emojis down below. I hope this video was helpful to you guys in some way. If it helps even just one of you, that would mean the world to me. So please let me know if you want to read any of these books. And if you have read any of these books, please leave a comment down below and tell me what you thought of them. Also, comment down below any other books that you guys have read that have helped you with grief or have helped you grieve. I feel like I'm on this hunt to find like amazing fictional stories that help, and I would love to know more. Like I said, I've only been reading for fun for the last year and a half, and so during that time I can't read every book out there. So leave down below your favorite books that relate to those topics. I think it would just be really great if we could all help each other out in that way. Also, comment down below any other type of book videos you guys are interested in. I might start posting more about books. I'm still going to post my art stuff, of course, but I love reading different books now and I really want to talk about them more, so I am thinking of doing this more often on my channel. So if there are any type of book videos you want me to do, just comment them down below. And yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate all the love and support you have all given me this past year and a half dealing with my dad's death, and you guys are just so wonderful in the comments, and I love the support on this channel, and I hope I can give back to you in some way, and I hope this video kind of helps in terms of grief. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.